Chapter 20. In the grand ballroom of the Emerald Palace, adorned with intricate blue and white architecture, the atmosphere was regal and majestic. Tall windows allowed sunlight to filter through, casting soft beams on the gathered crowd. The elegant balconies framed the room where a select few nobles and palace staff, the majority being from the Imperial city, stood in awe. It was summer, and most of the higher-ranking nobles were absent, leaving behind the bustling staff, who watched intently, as well as a few magicians from the towers. At the heart of the room, Princess Athanasia stood, her long golden hair cascading down her back, her royal blue gown with delicate frills and ribbons swaying with each movement. With a serene expression on her face, she raised one hand toward the sky, her command gentle but filled with power. For a moment, the room held its breath, and then, as though she had unlocked the mysteries of the universe, shimmering gold coins began to fall from the ceiling. The sight was awe-inspiring, the golden coins twinkling as they danced through the air like falling stars, their brilliance enhanced by the grand chandeliers above. The spectators were mesmerized, eyes wide in amazement. Many had only heard rumors of her potential, but now they saw it with their own eyes. Athanasia had awakened her magic. Among the crowd, the emperor's usual stern demeanor softened, his lips curling into the rarest of smiles. Though he did not voice it aloud, it was clear that this moment, this achievement of his daughter, filled him with a quiet pride. Standing nearby, Lucas watched with a knowing smirk on his face, as though this was an outcome he had fully expected. His gaze never left Athanasia, and though he stood far from her, there was an undeniable connection in his watchful eyes. Lillian, the princess's devoted nanny, beamed with pride, her hands clasped in front of her as she cheered for her charge. "You did it, Your Highness," she murmured to herself, her heart swelling with emotion. Felix, the princess's loyal knight, stepped forward to offer his congratulations, his voice full of admiration. "Incredible, Princess Athanasia," he said, his tone genuine and warm. "Your power is truly something to behold." The staff of the palace, many who had served her since childhood, couldn't help but join in the chorus of congratulations, clapping and cheering as the gold coins continued to flutter down. Their voices echoed throughout the ballroom, blending into one harmonious celebration of the princess's magical awakening. Athanasia, though proud, remained humble. She turned toward her father, her eyes seeking his approval, which she found in the form of his rare smile. Her heart fluttered, not just from the magic she had manifested, but from the overwhelming warmth of her father's silent support. "Thank you, Daddy," she whispered under her breath, though her words were meant only for him. The emperor, his eyes softening just a fraction more, nodded in acknowledgement. The coins finally began to settle around her, creating a gentle sea of golden wealth at her feet. As the magic faded, the applause grew louder, and the celebration continued, honoring the princess's newfound strength. A few days ago, the entire Imperial city had erupted into chaos when Princess Athanasia suddenly collapsed, coughing up blood in a shocking display. Panic spread quickly through the palace as the princess's condition grew dire. Lucas was the first to react, rushing to her side and isolating her from the chaos. The palace staff were sent away, and only the trusted members of the court remained, all on edge with fear and confusion. As Athanasia lay unconscious, it was clear to everyone that something had happened, a shift in her that none of them could fully understand. It was a rare moment where even Emperor Claude, who was known for his unshakable composure, visibly showed his emotions. He stood frozen for a moment, his usual cold demeanor faltering as he looked at his daughter, weak, vulnerable. His hands clenched at his sides, his expression betraying a rare vulnerability. The awakening of her magic had happened in that instant, unrestrained and unpredictable. No one could have anticipated that the long-suppressed force within her would erupt so suddenly, and with it, her body had been pushed to its limits. For 10 long days, the princess remained unconscious, her life hanging in the balance as her magic stabilized. During this time, Lucas remained by her side, never leaving her room. He watched over her, ensuring that her magic didn't spiral out of control, his usual aloof expression replaced with something far more concerned. Lillian, the princess's ever-dedicated nanny, also stayed by her side, keeping a quiet vigil. Even Felix, the princess's loyal knight, was restricted from being too close, though he never strayed too far from the princess's door. Finally, after 10 days of silence and tension, Athanasia stirred. Her crystal blue eyes fluttered open, her vision blurry at first, but as her surroundings came into focus, she realized where she was, her own room, in the heart of the palace. Lucas was the first to greet her. He sat at her bedside, his face softer than usual, an uncharacteristic warmth in his eyes. "You're awake," he murmured, his voice a touch more gentle than it typically was. Athanasia blinked, her mind trying to adjust to the sudden rush of awareness. She coughed lightly, her throat dry from the days of unconsciousness. "How long?" "10 days, Lucas answered. "We were all a little worried. You didn't exactly take it easy." As she took in the details of the room, her gaze shifted to the door, where her father, Emperor Claude, had just entered. His usual stern expression was tempered with something softer, a relief she had never seen from him before. It was as if the weight of 10 days of worry had been lifted from his shoulders now that his daughter had awakened. "Athanasia," Claude said, his voice low but steady. "I'm glad to see you awake." The princess looked up at him, her gaze steady, despite the uncertainty swirling within her. "I'm fine, Daddy," she assured him, her voice hoarse but determined. "It was a lot, but I'm not going anywhere." Claude nodded, though the concern didn't entirely fade from his eyes. He said quietly, "Rest for now. I'll have someone attend to you." Lucas gave a small nod of agreement, but his gaze lingered on the princess. "She'll be fine. The magic is under control for now." With that, the emperor nodded once more, seemingly satisfied. But as he turned to leave, he spared one last glance at his daughter. "Rest well. As the door closed behind him, Lucas took a seat by her side again. He didn't speak at first, but his presence was calming. Athanasia turned her head slightly, studying him. "You really stayed here the whole time?" she asked, surprised by his unwavering watchfulness. Lucas just gave her that characteristic smirk, though this time there was a faint trace of warmth behind it. "Wouldn't dream of leaving you alone. Someone had to make sure you didn't blow up the palace in your sleep." Athanasia couldn't help but laugh, a small sound that felt like a release after the intensity of the past 10 days. Her magic had awakened, unpredictable, overwhelming, but now she was awake. A few days after the grand celebration, Athanasia had been experimenting with her magic again, but this time with unexpected results. While the princess was simply trying to move some small objects around in the garden of the Emerald Palace, her magic surged beyond her control, and in the blink of an eye, she, Claude, Felix, Lucas, Lillian, and the entire palace staff found themselves on a tropical island. The change was immediate. One moment, they were surrounded by the grand architecture of the palace, and the next, they stood on the soft, white sands of a sun-kissed beach. Lush greenery surrounded them, and the sound of the ocean filled the air. "What in the world?" Lillian exclaimed, looking around in disbelief. "Athanasia, what have you done this time?" Athanasia blinked, her confusion evident as she looked at the unfamiliar landscape. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to move some things around, but this happened instead," she said, her voice tinged with concern. Claude, who had been watching his daughter with growing worry since her magic first began to awaken, looked at the scene with narrowed eyes. His patience, already strained by her unpredictable magic, wore thin. "Where are we?" he demanded, his usual stern demeanor faltering for only a moment. Felix, ever the cautious knight, was already scanning their surroundings. "It seems like we've been teleported. We need to figure out how to get back," he said, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword as he assessed their surroundings. Lucas, the ever-confident magician, was unbothered by the sudden change. He smirked and snapped his fingers. Instantly, tents, large, colorful umbrellas appeared, along with beach chairs, a barbecue grill, and a selection of tropical fruits on platters. A few seconds later, all of them were magically dressed in vintage bathing suits, with some resembling old-fashioned dresses, others sailor outfits. "Don't worry," Lucas said with a casual wave of his hand. "We'll make the best of it." If you're stuck here, you might as well enjoy it. Claude's eyes narrowed further as he glanced at his attire. Felix, who found himself was dressed in sailor uniform, sighed deeply. It seems we have no choice but to adapt, he muttered under his breath. Lillian, adjusting the vintage bathing dress she was now wearing, turned to Athanasia with an amused smile. Well, this isn't so bad. Maybe a little vacation would do us all some good, she teased, her tone light-hearted. Athanasia, whose golden hair shimmered in the sunlight, stood barefoot on the sand, a soft breeze lifting her parasol. She was dressed in a charming white sailor dress, her feet sinking gently into the sand. Her expression was one of quiet amusement as she twirled the golden-handled parasol, her blue eyes sparkling with excitement. I think I like it here, Athanasia said with a playful grin. It's so peaceful. Why not explore? Claude, always the one to keep things in order, took a deep breath, clearly reluctant to enjoy this unexpected change. Athanasia, we need to return to the palace. There's no time for this nonsense. But the princess was already enjoying herself, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Just for a little while, Daddy. It's been so long since we had a break. Let's take this moment to enjoy the scenery. Lucas, watching with a slight smirk, leaned against a palm tree. It's not often we get to take a breather like this. I'm sure a few hours won't hurt. Felix, though still wary, nodded toward the beach. If we're here, we might as well enjoy it. Lillian joined Athanasia at the water's edge, her laugh echoing as the two of them splashed each other, clearly enjoying the carefree moment. Athanasia's joy was contagious, and soon, Claude found himself relaxing ever so slightly as he watched his daughter. Felix, standing beside Claude, glanced at his superior. She does seem happy, he remarked, his usual stern demeanor softening in the warmth of the island atmosphere. Claude finally let out a sigh, his expression softening as he watched Athanasia. As he saw the joy on her face, he couldn't help but admit that maybe, just maybe, this change of scenery wasn't entirely the worst thing to happen. The sounds of laughter filled the air as everyone slowly started to relax and enjoy the moment. The island, with its vibrant, tranquil beauty, offered a brief escape from the pressures of palace life. The tropical island was alive with activity as the sun blazed overhead, casting a golden glow over everything. The servants, who had gotten to work preparing the barbecue with a sense of excitement, had managed to set up a small feast near the shaded area beneath the palm trees. The smell of sizzling meat mixed with the faint fragrance of tropical fruit, filling the air with a pleasant aroma. The sound of sizzling food and chatter blended with the rhythmic lapping of waves against the shore. Claude, having found a moment of peace amidst the bustle, stretched out on a white hammock tied between two tall palm trees, basking in the shade. The hammock swayed gently with the breeze, the rustling of palm fronds above him adding to the serenity of the moment. His eyes were closed as he listened to the sounds of the island, allowing himself to forget the weight of his royal duties for just a moment. Felix, still in his sailor suit, moved between the grill and the lounge area, his every movement precise as he helped Lillian serve cold refreshments. The ice that Lucas had conjured for them made the drinks particularly refreshing, and they handed them out to the staff as they worked. Meanwhile, Athanasia was lost in her own little world along the shoreline, her parasol held delicately in one hand as she gazed in awe at the natural wonders before her. It was her first time seeing the ocean, and she marveled at the vast expanse of blue stretching out before her. The gentle lapping of the waves against the shore was a sound she had never heard before, and the sight of the ocean's endless horizon filled her with wonder. She knelt down to collect seashells and starfish, her fingers brushing over the smooth, textured surfaces as she examined each one carefully. She was so absorbed in her discovery that she didn't notice Lucas approaching until he spoke, his voice carrying a teasing edge. "You look like you've never seen the world beyond the palace," Lucas remarked, a smirk tugging at the corners of his lips as he observed her fascination. Athanasia looked up from her finds, her golden hair glinting in the sunlight as her blue eyes sparkled with excitement. "I haven't," she admitted, her voice light and filled with a childlike wonder. "This is my first time outside the palace." Lillian, who had just brought over some drinks, and Felix, who had been nearby offering help, exchanged a quick glance at the princess's words. There was a pang of guilt that surged within them both. It was true, Athanasia had spent most of her life within the palace walls, her every movement watched over by her father's overprotective nature. The idea of her stepping beyond the safety of the palace had been unimaginable to the emperor. Felix, always the stoic knight, felt a quiet sadness stir in his chest as he thought of how much the princess had missed in her sheltered life. He didn't voice his thoughts aloud, but the subtle shift in his demeanor spoke volumes. Lillian, ever the maternal figure, looked at Athanasia with a mixture of sympathy and guilt. The young princess, who had known only the confines of the palace, had never experienced the world beyond the gates. Lillian wanted to tell her that the world was vast and beautiful, but the sadness in the princess's voice made it clear how much she had longed to see more of it. For a moment, Athanasia didn't notice the shift in the air around her. She was too focused on the tiny baby turtles that were emerging from the sand nearby, their small, fragile forms wobbling as they made their way toward the water. Her heart swelled with joy, and she turned back to the group, eager to share the moment with them. "Come, look. Baby turtles," she called excitedly, her voice high with enthusiasm. Her hand, still holding her parasol, gestured toward the tiny creatures. "Princess, look at them. They're so cute," Lillian exclaimed as she hurried over, a rare and unguarded smile spreading across her face. Felix, despite his usually stoic nature, couldn't help but soften as he approached, admiring the baby turtle's tiny, determined movements. "They're remarkable," he remarked quietly, his voice gentle as he crouched down to get a closer look. Lucas chuckled from where he stood, watching the princess with amusement. "You really do find the smallest things interesting, don't you?" he teased, his smirk widening as he leaned against a palm tree. Athanasia grinned, her expression bright with wonder. "How can you not? They're so small and determined," she said, her voice full of awe. She bent down, her fingers gently brushing over one of the turtle's shells. "It's so rare to see something so precious." As the princess continued to watch the baby turtles, Claude remained under the shade of his hammock, still resting peacefully as if unaware of the world around him. He had earned the moment of peace, but it was clear that, despite his usual stoicism, he was not completely indifferent to the sight of his daughter's joy. The faintest smile touched his lips as he lay there, eyes still closed. The day passed slowly, the heat of the sun tempered by the gentle breeze. As the sky began to change colors, turning to warm oranges and soft purples as the sun began to set, the group gathered together by the shore to watch the spectacle unfold before them. "Isn't it beautiful?" Athanasia murmured softly as she stood with Lucas, Felix, and Lillian, her eyes reflecting the vibrant colors of the sunset. "It is," Lillian agreed, her voice warm with affection. "This is a memory we'll all cherish." Felix, standing beside Claude, gave a nod in agreement. Perhaps a change of scenery was exactly what we needed. For a moment, there was a rare sense of peace between them all, as they watched the sun dip below the horizon. The world seemed to slow, and for the first time, Athanasia felt like she was truly a part of it. This simple day, filled with laughter, turtles, and the ocean breeze, was everything she had been denied until now. And as the evening wrapped around them, everyone shared in the tranquility of the moment, knowing that despite their royal duties, they had been given something far more precious: time. Like, comment, and subscribe to be notified for updates in the series.